Hey guys, Fox here, and today we're going to be talking about a pretty big accomplishment for the USFL, as Maurice Alexander Jr. has recently signed with the Detroit Lions, which makes him the 30th player from the USFL to sign on an NFL team. It's a pretty big deal to have happen, and it definitely happened to someone who is well deserving. Alexander was without a doubt one of the best players in the USFL, despite being one of the latest, or one of the very back-end receivers picked in the draft. He was a very solid receiver who ended up having 234 total yards. But what really made him great was his kick returning. He was the all-USFL kick returner, and he's also a solid punt returner as he did average 12 yards per return on punting. But his 31.5 kick return average was very solid, and he had 1,185 total AP yards, which was actually only behind Victor Bolden for the league lead. And as for the team he is joining, he is currently not really shown on the depth chart, but that's since it's so new. But he will be competing for both the punt return, kick return, and receiving spots. As for the special teams, their only kick returner is Godwin Igwebuike, and then their returners in punt are Khalif Raymond and Amon-Ra St. Brown. Then their starters for receiving are Amon-Ra St. Brown, DJ Chark, and not for a while, but will be when he's healthy, Jameson Williams. If you don't know, Jameson Williams tore his ACL during the collegiate championship game, and he's probably going to be out for the first few weeks of the season. Then their backups are Josh Reynolds, Quintez Cephas, and Khalif Raymond. And then the third stringers are Trinity Benson, Tom Kennedy, and Khalil Pimpleton. Then fourth string is Josh Johnson. As for the returners, Igwebuike is a running back who is not really on their depth chart for running back wise. He's purely there as a kick returner. He did average a very solid near 25 yards per return, which is a very solid amount to average. So Maurice Alexander getting above him will mainly be whether or not they probably see Alexander as being a legit option as a backup receiver, which they'll probably do to save roster spots. As for punt returners, Amon-Ra St. Brown is technically their backup, though he didn't do any punt returns last year. And Khalif Raymond is their starter. He's been in the league for heading to his 7th year, and he's played in every year except 2018, and he's pretty much been a return specialist aside from last year since, Igwebuike was their kick returner. As for punt returns, he averages a career 9 yards per punt return, so decent, but last year he did average 11 and had 236 total yards on 21 returns, so he definitely could be that really solid guy, and considering the fact that Alexander was more of a kick return guy, I see him more probably being a kick returner. But as for the receivers, their only fourth stringer right now, Josh Johnson, is an undrafted free agent rookie. Then the third stringers, Khalil Pimpleton is an undrafted free agent rookie. Tom Kennedy is heading into his 4th year of his career, but he's really only played in 2 years. He didn't play at all in 2020, but he has been on this team for the whole time. Though last year he did have 54 yards receiving, but that was only on 6 receptions, as he really didn't play that often. Trinity Benson is heading into his 2nd year. He played a bit more as he even started a couple games, and he did have 100 yards receiving. But again, he's not really one of those decent second option type guys. He probably won't even end up being a backup, as their backups are pretty solid. Josh Reynolds was with the Rams for his first 4 years, and then last year was with both Tennessee and Detroit. He's overall been a very solid third option type receiver. His best year was his last year at LA, where he ended up having over 600 yards on 50 receptions. Overall, he's a very solid type of backup guy to have. He has 11 career touchdowns and usually gets a couple a year. But in 2018, he ended up having 5 in his 2nd year with 400 yards. So he's a very solid, dependable third option, 4th option type receiver. As for Quintez, he was a 5th round pick for Detroit a couple years ago. In the 2 years he's played, his stats went down, but he also did play in a lot less games. But he ended up having 200 yards last year, which was a lot less than his 350 yards that he had his rookie year, especially considering that his yards per reception were better in his rookie year. But he could definitely develop into a solid backup type receiver. And then Khalif Raymond is heading into his 7th year. He also played in pretty much every year but 2018, as 2018 was as we mentioned before, is the only year he didn't play. Receiving-wise, he pretty much has been a nobody in the receiver end, except for last year. Last year, he was one of their starting receivers, and he ended up being a very solid receiver at 576 total yards, with an average of 12 yards per reception. But more impressively, he did have 4 touchdowns, so he definitely is a very solid receiver to have as one of your backups. As for their starters, Jameson Williams, as we mentioned, as of now, it's probably going to be Cleve Raymond starting, I would imagine, in place of Jameson Williams while he's getting healthy. But they recently did sign DJ Chark, who was actually a Pro Bowler in his sophomore year. He was a second-round pick back in 2018. He had a pretty forgettable rookie year, but then his sophomore year he had 1,000 yards in 15 games. He ended up being a Pro Bowler. And then 2020, when the quarterback was becoming more of a question mark for that team, he only had 700 yards, which is still solid. But last year, he dealt with some injuries and, the whole Jaguars thing. But overall, he does have 150 receiving yards last year, which is decent for the circumstances given, as he only did receive 7 passes, which he still got 2 touchdowns on. Very solid player. He's only fumbled once in his career. And then their other starter, who I think is by far their best receiver, is Maurice St. Brown. For being a 4th-round pick, he sure played like a first-round pick. He was one of the best receivers in the league last year for rookies, in a year that was pretty good at rookie receivers. He had 900 yards, Jared Goff throwing to him. So whether or not you're a Goff believer, the bottom line is Amon-Ra St. Brown made him look a lot better than a lot of people would expect. He did have a touchdown on the ground as well as 5 in the air, and he did have 90 receptions. He was a very solid, catch-and-run type guy. He's definitely a very, very good receiver to have as your key guy. So as for where Maurice Alexander will be, in the return game, I could see him becoming their starting kick returner. I feel like if they don't want Godwin to be their actual on a running back roster, I feel like they might save a space and put Maurice Alexander as a backup receiver and as kick returner. As for receiver-wise, I could see him definitely becoming a 3rd stringer without a doubt, but 2nd string, they have a lot of decent 2nd string guys. So I think he'll be one of those rotational pieces at 3rd string that'll only get in a couple plays, but I feel like he'll be more of a kick returner, and he can definitely be a very solid contributor on that front. This has been Zomfox. If you enjoy this content and want to be notified as soon as I upload any videos, make sure to subscribe and hit the bell, and as always, have a great night.